I think it's fair to say the $4 a gallon of gas that we're paying for and prices going up on everything else. While our next guest says there's a silver lining in all of this somewhere, says there are actually ways to cash in on high energy prices. As we have Doug Flynn, co-founder of Flynn Zito Capital Management, with us this morning. Good to have you, Doug.
Thank you.
How do we make money on what's happening here?
Well, the one thing you really probably don't want to get too much into anymore is the natural resources that the plays that everyone has been in the last couple of years.
That's such a huge run already.
Huge run. There's probably still room there, but the evaluation-wise, it's not really where you want to be. There's better opportunity even in the utilities area, where there's a lot of free cash flow. And if you want to have some fun in investing and try to participate in making money in this time, it's you really look to the renewable and alternate energy area, so that you can cash in on the green movement that we have.
All right, so give us an idea of how should an individual investor be looking at buying some of these stocks, individual stocks in this area, ETFs. What's the best way to get into renewables and alternative energy?
The stocks are probably the last thing you want to do, because much like any newer type of field, you don't know which are the survivors. Some of the companies like GE have a huge GE power area that focus in this, so you don't really probably want to buy that because it's just one, even though they're a big player,
sure,
it's part of a big company. So you're dealing with a lot of really small companies, and there's a lot of risk with a lot of really small companies. So we much prefer an ETF, so you have the broad-based diversification there, and there are many in the solar area and the different areas. Or there's even unit investment trusts where it's like an ETF, but it's a package of individual securities that isn't more actively managed. It's just held to a maturity date.
Right. I was going to say I don't know a lot about unit investment trusts. They're similar to ETFs, though.
They're similar to ETFs. They trade. They're offered through a couple of major companies like First Trust or Claymore, and they have packed securities in this area specifically with renewable and alternate energy. So you're in there.
Is there one of these areas within alternative, you mentioned solar, is there one of these areas that's more attractive than others, or are you just willing to play anything that's outside of big oil that's already had a huge run? Because a lot of these solar stocks and these other, they've had some pretty big runs of their own here of late.
They definitely have, and that's why I think that unless you wanted specifically solar, and you can get an ETF that's strictly solar,
sure,
I prefer the more diversified one, just because, just like picking one stock versus a basket, picking one area versus the balance of them, it's hard to say. But there is definitely a movement towards doing things more green and trying to take advantage of that as we move along there. And there's a lot of truth in looking at the future of the amount of money that can be made in those areas. So I would play it more with the ETFs and the UITs.
Is this an election play to some extent? I mean, would you be betting, if you're betting on alternatives, on, say, a Barack Obama presidency, somebody who's talked a lot about alternative energy?
I don't think so. I think it's
either way.
Yeah, I think that if you look at if you look at real estate for a moment, the owners of real estate are trying to make their buildings more green. I think it's becoming the thing to do, and almost if you don't become more green, you'll be left behind and less preferable. So I think it's more of a movement, especially the longer we have $5 oil prices. You know, that's the trade-off. If you have $2 or $3 oil prices again, we're all going to revert to our old fat, lazy ways and not do anything. So
of course,
at higher prices, these other things, the ingenuity that goes along with it, is really the opportunity.
Higher prices are the cure for higher prices in a lot of ways, and also the opportunity comes up. It's an interesting conversation, isn't it, given what's happened in Congress this week, where people are going after these quote-unquote speculators. A lot of people have made a lot of money with oil running up. I mean, we're looking at these stocks because the other ones have run up so much already.
That's true. I used to think when I was filling up the tank, and it would be almost $100 to fill it up, that at least I had my oil stocks to come back and make up for the fact that I'm pumping it in over here. At least I'm getting it back. The problem is, if you don't have invested assets, you're not participating on the gain side. So I think a lot of that gain is already there. You really want to look at the other ways to make money. It's a little bit riskier, so for a small piece, it can have a place. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there, more of a movement than anything else.
I don't know if it makes up for the $100 to fill up the tank. It maybe comes close. It makes up a little bit of it, brings it down to 60 or 70, which we could all live with. Doug, thanks a lot. Doug Flynn from Flynn Zito Capital Management. Jen, over to you.
Yeah, it's time for the early